Welcome to the Dietmar Tonight Show. This first episode is about meetings and leadership. Our guests tonight are Guest 1 and Guest 2. And here is your host, Dietmar.
Good evening. As we know, there is a global crisis threatening the human race. Meetings. Here I have remarkable meetings from the past I found, and the first one I thought about, was there any very weird location for a meeting, and I found this. So there were two people and they met on the moon. That had a result, which was this one, Dark Side of the Moon. The meeting with the influential minutes of the meeting, of course, Magna Carta, this idea that nobody is above the law, not even the king. If you do not believe me that this was influential, you maybe noticed that 10 days ago, Letitia James appeared in front of the cameras. At that very moment, she says, nobody is above the law. And then they spent the rest of the meeting talking about who would be the rat, but none of them said we could go home. They did not make any useful decision. I think they sticked to the plan, although they knew that it would definitely fail. And next day, Jesus became Jesus Christ, and that was the beginning of Christianity. The longest meeting I found was this one. There were 20 participants, and 3 of them died during the meeting because of natural causes. And the shortest meeting I found was this one. They announced a concert in which they would only play one note. And then they went to the concert, and there were, in fact, some people there. They went on the stage and they played an E, and then everybody went home again. This is, I think, a good sample for a very effective meeting. Now, before we talk with the guests, what is the worst meeting pattern I can imagine? I'm sitting in the meeting, this is me, and I have my goal and my dream. And then there are some people in the meeting, and they all have their own goals and their own dreams and everything they are interested in. And I mean, this is the situation in which we start. And then the boss shows up, and the boss tells us what the goal is, and we are somehow staring at him, and we try to figure out what that means for us. And what it means for us is, of course, that we already know it, that the boss wants to convince us that we should simply look at that goal, make it our goal, forget about our own dreams and what we would like to do, and all work together into that direction. And if we put that, let's label that a little bit, and I would say this is the reason why we call people directors because they give us direction. And whenever I sit in a meeting like that, what I feel is that there is a person dictating in which direction we all must go, that creates, of course, a conflict, which is something like that. Because what I would love to do is to work on my own goals, and what I simply do not want to do is everything that is not my goal, which means I'm not the only person in that situation, because everybody in this meeting is in this situation. In a business meeting, what I want to say is that when the management has no other option than to change my motivation to go into my direction, into the other direction, by all these things we have in this list. And I must say, this is what I absolutely do not like, and what makes me try to evade and escape all these meetings, because they try to do it with charisma, and with threats, and telling me that I will lose my job if I do not follow that direction. They offer punishment, or they try to motivate me. They try to convince me that it's much better over there. I can immediately sense that it will be a meeting of this worst type, because in the agenda, in the invitation, it already says the meeting is mandatory. And of course, there is a whole consulting industry behind that to teach us how we run meetings, which have that whole situation at the beginning within them, in their core. And from that moment on, there is a development I see in the meeting, which is then that the goal is set, and everybody has to sacrifice their own life and their own direction and what they want to love, what they want to do, in order to reach the goal. And the goal feeds the ego of the boss, and that feeds the ego of their boss, and they are promoted. And this is what we are dealing with, and I feel very trapped in that. It then becomes a spiral in which the boss says, "Oh, we somehow reached the first goal," and then they say, "No, now the goal is bigger, and we need to achieve more and more and more," and it feeds the blown-up ego of the boss. And in the end, it goes into a situation where the goal is, of course, absolutely out of reach. We are exhausted, and it eventually leads to a situation in which we are all dead. The goal is not reached. The ego of the boss collapses, and he gets, or they get, into a status of utter wrath. This is my simplification of the worst meeting. I can imagine the worst pattern of a meeting, the worst culture of a meeting. And I found two movies who really describe that in a very precise way, and very entertaining, but also very enlightening. The first example is this one, which has the title Acquire, Wrath of God. And of course, there is the other movie, which is the movie of that worst climate and culture, which is of course this one, Downfall. If you don't know it, you might have seen many memes coming out of that, and I mean, it's absolutely perfect. When it comes to the question, what is the worst meeting you can ever be in? Let's go to the opposite question. What is the best meeting pattern I can imagine? I love to make shoes. Let's imagine I do that. I think I would really love to make shoes. And this is me sitting in a cave. Around me, there are other cavemen, colleagues. And they also have a long list of, I mean, they have their own passions and the things they are interested in, and things they really love to do. And you see this list, and I think when you look into the list, you immediately see where that goes, where that is going. Because let's say one of us is interested in studying animals and their behavior. Another one is interested in pure hunting and perfection, and develop that to perfection. Then another one is interested in teaching the use of weapons. Another one is interested in cooking. Another one is making clothes and shoes like I do. Another one is completely different kind of a person. She's interested in seeing the future. And we have, of course, someone around who is completely passionate about healing wounded people. I think it's completely obvious that what will happen here as a consequence. You see, these are parts laying around, very specialized parts. When I look at that, I do not have so much hope that that would ever make any sense. But on the other hand, there might be these parts working together in a very clever design. And what they produce is that that in the end they are an engine which is doing something. It is doing something that is important, which is absolutely not in any of these parts. But it then emerges when things are put together as a system behavior, which goes beyond everything we expected. The behavior of the total system will then be something the parts do not have on their own, and it only emerges when they interact. And now comes, I think, on top of that, the interesting thing that people are even much further developed than engine parts. And that means that when you put a bunch of people in a room and they have very, very different interests and very different skills, and they are very diverse, I think this is the one thing we as human beings are really good at, and that is that we can build a system which has an emerging behavior which goes beyond. In this case, of course, we can talk about what does our chief do then? And I think the difference is that the chief doesn't really focus so much on the goal. The goal emerges from what we want, because we are starving and we want to put everything together. And we understand that by doing what we love, each of us doing something different, we can get into this emerging behavior of becoming good hunters and being successful with that. But I expect the chief then to give me, for instance, all the resources I need to make my perfect shoes, my perfect hunting shoes, my perfect shoes for everyone in the village. Of course, it only will work if at least the chief makes sure that everybody gets a fair share according to the contribution they made. It is a dream, okay? And I thought maybe I can find some examples again in the movies. What I found at the beginning of my search was very old minutes of meetings where I think it worked exactly like that. They looked like this, okay? Or like this. And I found a movie then, which is very recent, I think 2020 or something like that. And it is this one, Hidden Figures. It is heartwarming and mind-blowing. It shows, for me, it showed that my dream of an idea of the best meeting culture can lead to something really, really interesting. Really fascinating. Now, to wrap it up, my very, 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 very simplistic and brutal primitive worldview when it comes to meetings and leadership is this one, which is if I am sitting in a meeting where the meeting culture is absolutely terrible, then I conclude that it is not only a downfall culture in the meeting, but it is also completely linked to the company culture. And I suspect that the company culture will also be a downfall culture. On the other hand, if I want to change the company culture, the meeting culture in a company, I am very convinced that all these tricks we use to improve meetings, I think they will not work until we address and approach and change the company culture from a downfall culture to a hidden figures culture. I will feel very, very comfortable in these meetings, because in the meetings I will still talk about my shoes, about the shoes I produce. The footprint of my shoes would be still on the moon.
Some of the men you're about to meet are of an entirely different caliber than us. The gentleman should learn the nature of the operation. That closes the ranks. The Conference 2023 on Netflix. Your ad could be here. It would be seen by at least a handful of people.